And welcome to a Cowboys and NFL Draft special. I am JP Heath. We've got Kevin and Josh here on the Texas Porch. Texas Talk with a touch of sports. This is one of those days/nights where we definitely hit the sports, and the closest thing resembling an actual sporting event took place the last 3 days. And gents, I don't know about y'all, but it was just good to sit and actually watch something that actually resembled sports. How are y'all doing?
Good.
Yeah, it's one of the few times I've actually watched quite a bit of the draft because I'm usually out at a game covering something while I'm just kind of looking at numbers and names coming in. So it's kind of different. I think it's the first time in, I don't know, a long time since I've actually watched it. But actually, like you said, having something to that at least resembled sports is pretty nice.
Yeah,
it was, absolutely. I will say this, but back before they moved the draft to Thursday, me and a friend of mine used to every year go. It was on Saturday. It started early in the morning when they had a Dallas Cowboys draft day party at a bar on the South Street of Lamar in downtown Dallas. And that was a lot of fun. We'd go every year. It was free to get in. They would have Rowdy out there dancing. They'd have the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders, the Desperado dancers. They gave away stuff. They'd have players. I got DeMarcus Ware's autograph. They'd have group pictures of the Dallas Cowboys that year and group pictures of the cheerleaders. They have cheerleaders signing autographs. And then they moved it to Thursday and killed all my joy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as usual, when they go to the primetime format, that kills it for the common fans. When you were starting that, knowing you and our past together, I thought you were going to say there was lots of adult beverages involved, but I'm sure both of those.
Oh, there were. It was at a bar. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, America's team had widely considered an A draft. I haven't seen really any A pluses, a couple of Bs out there, but one thing we are going to get to also before I forget the art of the T's, just the Texas college ties and the draft picks and what area of the Lone Star State had the most draft picks in the NFL, because probably not a shock that football is kind of important here in the Lone Star State, but going down the list, guys, I don't know how you want to roundtable it, but just jump in. CeeDee Lamb, wow. I mean, I don't think anybody expected him to land the Cowboys drafting at 17. Right. Obviously, wide receiver out of OU. He was the sixth player on their board. Fascinating backstory to him is that he originally was from New Orleans. He was displaced from Hurricane Katrina there to Richmond Foster. Heard this earlier today on one of the walks that had 33 touchdowns in high school. That's the second most in Texas high school history. That surprised me, that number. I thought it had been around 50 or so. But anyway, he was a high school star. But just before we get into more of what he could fit in scheme-wise, I mean, all three of us, we're not going to try to pass ourselves off as these big college draft experts, but that is one name that most people know, mainly from the Red River game where he dominated Texas a couple times. But draft, I had no even faintest recollection. Nobody talked about him dropping that far. He was like the Cowboys had number 6. So I guess first off, Kevin, when he dropped, I mean, that had to make you pretty giddy there when he dropped like that.
Absolutely. And at that point, you got to wonder, is this some sort of, COVID-19 effect happening where CeeDee Lamb is dropping this far? Nobody expected that to happen. They definitely expected him to be taken earlier than that. But another thing, and I heard some of the sports talk guys out of Dallas mention this, is that not only were they happy that CeeDee Lamb dropped that far, and I echo this sentiment, they were also happy that the Cowboys made the right call and actually drafted him. They had much greater need than wide receiver. Mm-hmm. Sure, he's a great replacement for Randall Cobb. I mean, stellar, and he'll have a rookie contract. Those are in effect now, so it'll be a few years before that big contract, if he pans out like he should, before that big contract starts hitting us. So we got a nice window there. After paying him, but certainly not a huge need for the Cowboys, but the best player on the board and a surprise best player on the board to be dropping that far. And the Cowboys actually took him. So I echo that sentiment very much. A lot of times you've seen stuff like that. Now, maybe the years go by and you're happy they didn't take him. But at the time, I was like, come on, CeeDee Lamb. I was watching it and was like, wait, did CeeDee Lamb go? Surely he, wait.
Too good to be true. Yeah.
Yeah, he's still available. Surely they're going to be. They picked him. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, on that note, Josh, because I know we were texting about this. One, Kevin hit it on. We don't talk about this beforehand. This is all natural between us three. But we did text a couple times about I didn't think that they could make that right call. But at the same time, they needed, like Kevin said, they needed pass rush, and the name that was out there, safety. But I didn't really see them going safety. But
They never do.
Yeah, they never do. And that's a talk coming up here later. But they had Chase on there. I know Mr. Scoop draft guy, Josh, you can break down his techniques, but I just figured they'd mess it up somehow, Josh. Is that kind of, I guess that sums up a lot of our, at least my Cowboys chit-chat for the podcast, but I just didn't think that they could make the good pick like they did, Josh.
Well, being a Cowboy fan, usually you just assume they're going to mess it up. So you kind of think it, but watching the draft and, you got Jerry Jones on his yacht and you see Mike McCarthy and they're just downright giddy. Like Jerry Jones is almost cackling to himself. And when I saw that, I'm like, he's going to pick CD Lamb because he's not going to be this excited about, Chase on or whoever else that was going. I'm like, whether it's a good pick or not, and I think it's a great pick, he couldn't help himself at that point. And he was just by watching him, you could see how excited he was to get him and just making that splash kind of won. And like we've said, I'm no draft expert or anything, but I watch Oklahoma probably more than I do most teams because watch Texas, watch what he did to them, and watch different teams. And he's just always open, just always, nobody's catching him. So, just too good to pass up on whenever you get that. Just adding him to that offense where, the defense still has some issues that they addressed later, but just somebody that's so much better than the actual ones they had for needs. That was too good to pass up.
And Kevin, you and Josh know me better than any, as far as Cowboys fandom over the years, going back. Kevin longer, but Josh more recent, but both of you together know me better. So you probably could read my thoughts here, but my immediate thought was, and I'm a positive guy, but a negative sports fan. If you have to sum me up in a few, just a sentence or two, I just like Josh echoed my thoughts. Okay. What my thought was, okay, what's wrong with him? Why is he drafting? But the dominoes that fell when the Raiders took Ruggs, the speedster out of Alabama, it just seemed like the most Raiders of Raiders picks to get enamored with the 4-2 guy. And great,
A good point.
But then
good point.
I didn't see why would Denver take Judy when they had the option for Lamb? Yeah, because Denver picked Denver was before the Raiders, right? I should have broke it down from the Cowboys spot. But anyway, my immediate thought, and I heard a little bit of questions since then, but I mean, is there a downside here? McCarthy has said he can utilize him in all four spots, both sides of the ball. He's speedy. He can break coverages. He can go over the top. He could be used in special teams too from the return standpoint. So kind of argue with me here. What am I missing? How do they get so lucky in having such a seemingly jewel fall in the laps like this, Kevin?
And you mentioned Jerry Jeudy. He had some injury concerns as well. And I haven't heard any knocks on CeeDee Lamb, and Josh, haven't watched him more than I have. I'll probably be able to speak to this a little more. But when you look at it, he was a consensus first wide receiver taken off the board. That was the wide opinion throughout the sports world, and he wasn't taken. And then you got to wonder, with the social distancing, teams not actually able to work out their draft picks and things like that. So maybe they relied too hard on too much on combine scores, or maybe they just got looking at the tape too much, or maybe they did some phone calls and these guys, and maybe CeeDee Lamb isn't fun to talk to. I don't know. I don't know why he would fall. These other receivers, they think they fit their needs better, but it's a good one to fall to the Cowboys. It was probably the only receiver for the Cowboys that you would look at and go, yeah, they should take that over anybody else if he falls. That's probably the other one. You're probably not necessarily thinking that about Jerry Jeudy or Riggs, and you're going like that. But I don't know. I don't know why he fell and why the other teams didn't want him more than the other top wide receivers.
Yeah, I think the reason was, and it was a minor reason, was that he didn't test just off the board like Jeudy. Judy's this they're all physical freaks, but I think that the
Right.
one minor knock, because they're nitpicking. When they had the underwear Olympics, they're nitpicking so much. Like maybe he was a 4.51 instead of a 4.48.
Yeah.
I mean, little things like that. I think he had like 11 reps at 225 is another thing I read about him. But I don't know, Josh. I mean, you out of us three, you probably saw him more. But I mean, is there a reason to be skeptical in our skeptical nature, or should we just smile at the fortune of the football gods that this landed in the laps of us fans here?
I might as well just smile. I'm sure there's reasons to be skeptical, but the Ruggs pick was one, like you said, the most Raider thing ever, because I don't think many people had him going number one. He's just super fast, and the Raiders couldn't help themselves by getting there. And Judy, I'd seen he's above Lamb on a few of the boards I'd seen. So, but I think, like y'all were saying, that they weren't going to take Judy if he was there. I think Lamb was the one that if he dropped, then they were going to take him. I remember watching the Red River game last year and thinking, God, I'm glad he didn't have to face the Longhorns again. So, just one of those guys that you hated to see if you're on the other team. It really didn't matter who they were playing. He had big games even in that demolition by LSU. He had some good numbers, and against the good teams, he put up good numbers. And maybe it was like Kevin said, teams can overthink themselves whenever they don't actually get to see them as much. So maybe they found a reason why they didn't want him. And at 17 for the Cowboys, there's really no reason that you think you can outthink yourself and say, no, we don't want this guy.
Okay, you could pair him with Gallup and Cooper and be set for a long, long time. Cooper has the 2-year option, I heard, where you'd be out. So if Cooper is expendable, or if Gallup continues to ace in like you expect, and Lamb is 3/4 as good as you project, not saying you expect Cooper to be bad, but you've got that fail-safe there too.
Yeah, you're going to have something to look at in about 3 years, some big numbers. If CeeDee Lamb doesn't hold out before that, depending on how. But teams are going to have some control. It's going to be hard for him to really be too stellar in that offense when he's the number 3, when he's theoretically the slot guy or whatever. But you also there was another Minnesota Vikings in the 90s were in this kind of situation where Randy Moss, for clear reasons, everybody knew the reasons he fell, the character reasons, that he fell to them, and he came in a stellar wide receiver core. You had Chris Carter, and I forget the other receiver, but he was very strong too. I forget his name. And he came in, you put Randy Moss, one of perhaps the most physically gifted wide receiver in NFL history, in the slot, and he was so good he made Dante Culpepper look like a Pro Bowler. Well, that's the type of situation the Cowboys are in. CeeDee Lamb's not Randy Moss. I'm not saying that, but with the rising star of Gallup, who looks spectacular last year, and Amari Cooper, a proven talent, you add CeeDee Lamb in there, and that could be scary. That's all the offensive weapons, and then you get teams worried about that, and Ezekiel Elliott guts them up the middle.
Yeah, and then I've heard some talking heads you mentioned earlier referencing the shows out of Dallas saying that it could, at least I heard, I don't know if you heard this, that they said, oh, this could be the best wide receiver core in the league now. Like, okay, wait. Part of my aforementioned skeptical nature, I'm like, all right, settle down, just be happy. I mean, I
think it was close anyway. Anyway.
As far as a 1 and a 1A, like Cooper and Gallup, like Cooper, again, this is opening up a big can to discuss a lot later in the season, when and if we do get a season. But Cooper, once Cooper came on last year, from a production sense, he made Dak look so much better. And they had that obvious chemistry. But I think if you get out of Lamb, if you can get 800 yards, 5 touchdowns, you think of a kind of a Dez rookie year where he can just show you those flashes. You don't have to rely on it, but maybe he has a couple games, 170, like a 110. But if you get the 4 for 60 games and a touchdown every 4th game, I think that's a good rookie season for Lamb.
Absolutely. And you got to make teams will have to respect him as well, and that stretches defense. It opens up more passing lanes for Gallup. It opens up more for Amari Cooper. And last year you would see in the games where Gallup had a poor game, Cooper would have a good one. Cooper had a poor game, Gallup had a good one, and that's because they were shifting coverages and things like that. So if you try to get in a situation where you're able to bottle both of them up and stop Ezekiel Elliott somehow, then CeeDee Lamb should go straight up the seam for, 200 yards and a couple of touchdowns.
All right, sticking with the draft. Again, this is the Cowboys draft special here, the Texas Porch. Josh and Kevin, I'm JP. So in the second round, first day's done, everybody's giddy. In the second round, Trayvon Diggs falls to them, and that set up really the A grades. How dare anybody even say an A-, but the A to A, almost A+ grades of the draft when they get Diggs, who a lot are saying that he's the best corner on the Cowboys roster right now. Like once his name was called, snap, he's the Cowboys' best corner, but long, physical guy. Obviously, Nick Saban's got that reputation for developing defensive backs, but immediate starter, opposite. I mean, you read different things. Is he opposite Awuzie and Brown? If Brown's probably the nickel guy, or is he opposite Brown? You pay Brown, 3-year, $15 million extension. So Brown's, you talk about late draft additions in the past. Brown's been really good, but you've got a dude here, and Diggs, like CeeDee Lamb, is going to be a special teams guy too. So, what were y'all's thoughts? First with Josh, I guess, being Mr. Draftnik now these days. Your thoughts on Diggs when he fell in the lap again, and they didn't mess it up. I keep sarcastic, but still a little realism there. They did the good pick that was in front of them right there.
I like that because obviously the secondary, we've seen enough of it. It was a semi-disaster at times. So, the guys like that, he can come in, and I'm sure they're planning on him being a big part of the team really quick. So another one that they just couldn't pass up on, which fortunately they didn't. It seemed like all these first two at least almost fell in their lap, where they're like, they just waited there, because you would have thought CeeDee Lamb, you would have thought you had to trade up to get, which that would have been kind of dumb to trade up, I think, because you wouldn't have wanted to waste the rest of your draft. But when they got him, that was perfect. And then when Diggs fell down to him, then that was perfect. They didn't have to give up anything to him, where I think they'd said maybe they had him as a late first-round guy or early second-round guy. I could be wrong on that, but it seems like they thought he was going to be gone a lot earlier. They weren't even going to have the option to get him. So once they got him, another one, there's going to be growing pains with rookie cornerbacks, but you stick him in there, and he's probably going to be better than most anybody that would have been playing for the Cowboys right now anyway. So it's not like he's going up against these world beaters there. So, another great one that was right there for him. And fortunately, like we were talking about Jerry Jones, he didn't mess it up this time. So that's kind of where I thought about it.
Yeah, Kevin, thoughts on that? And they lose Jones in the offseason, and immediately Diggs is in there. I mean, that Jones, you understood Jones because all the money they were piling up on the offensive side. So right. I understood that, but getting Diggs makes that Jones blow obviously a lot more manageable there.
Well, and I understood Jones, but to not turn around and go ahead and sign Dak, that's what I didn't understand. I thought that's what they were freeing the money up for, but we'll see where that situation winds up landing. But still, losing Jones, he was not a turnover creator. Some of that could have been scheme. I've heard some talk about, like, they didn't say look at the ball. They didn't say go for the ball. They said break up the pass, and he was extremely good at that, and he was worth a lot of money. Losing him was a serious blow. And then to echo what Josh said, you see Diggs falling. Basically, nobody expected him to be there, and this was a serious need. And I think, as you mentioned, JP, this is where the high grades start coming from, which I have seen a few A pluses. The A's coming from in the draft was the splash pick early, the clear one. They're like, hey, you're kind of foolish if you don't take this pick. It doesn't matter what you need. You're kind of foolish if you don't. It could be, this is one of the best chances you'll get at having a, stellar player on your team in a very important position. And then need. And with Diggs, it kind of hit both. It's like, well, you're kind of foolish if you don't take Diggs for such an important position on the defense. And this happens to be one of the most serious needs on your defense as well. So it hit both boxes right there. And Jerry didn't screw it up. Woohoo!
I don't know if I have a whole lot more to add to that, but yeah, it is just the perfect thing. Like he was saying, he was one of those best players available at the time, in addition to being the biggest need for the Cowboys. So, we can praise. I get maybe our expectations are just really low for what we've seen out of Jerry Jones in the past, where we're like, it doesn't make any kind of sense not to get him, but the fact that he actually got him, we can exhale and say, okay, well, made another good pick there.
Hey, I will say this. I think for the past, maybe 4 or 5 years, Jerry has started stepping back more on the operations, letting Steven take over, especially draft day and talent acquisition and things like that. And it has been a refreshing change of pace. The past few years, the Cowboys have been rated high in the draft, and they have hit very well. Dak Prescott is a fantastic example. Now, that you got to be super lucky to get a 4th-round quarterback of the quality of Dak Prescott to begin with, but that he was on the board. They took him, and then a series of unfortunate events actually puts him in the game. But the scouting and everything has been coming together, and I think Jerry hasn't been in there going, let's get Quincy Carter. Come on, guys.
Johnny Manziel, yeah.
Sitting back a little bit and letting the people he's hired to make those calls and do that job, let them do it.
I will pick nits with you on one thing you said. The 16 draft will go up against any draft in Cowboys history. But I don't think they've drafted well the last few years. I don't think there's this huge chorus of ovations for what you said, that they're drafting so well. Yeah, they hit on Gallup a couple years ago. That's good. They did have the 1st-round pick last year with the Cooper deal.
Right.
But they got Connor Williams. Okay. I mean, he's not terrible, and he's got that flexibility.
He's much more needed now with Travis Frederick.
Yeah.
And Travis Frederick was a draft pick too that they kind of stretched on, but he turned out to be stellar, and who could see?
But that was 10 years. I mean, what I'm saying is since 16, let me kind of squeeze it down.
Yeah.
Like since 16, they have not hit home runs, and with the LVE, Leighton Vander Esch injury, you don't know about him. He seemed like a good pick at the time, but again, not too.
When did they take Vander Esch, though? It seems like some of these picks, like Jalen Smith and Vander Esch, now they're starters, but they took them late in the draft. So these were like gambles. I think Smith was a 2nd-rounder, but he would have been a top 5 pick.
Yeah, he had the injury in the Fiesta Bowl. Vander Esch was about right, I think. Is he a 2nd or 3rd-year guy? He was a 2nd-year guy this past season, so he would have been the 18 draft, correct? That sound right?
I know what it is. It's Taco. Taco is yeah.
There you go.
2017. But we got Awuzie and Jordan Lewis. In 2 and 3, and that's all right. Awuzie is probably going to be our starter now in 2017. But Taco, yeah, and nobody graded them high on Taco at the time either.
And now, that's not aging well. But I just had to hit that pinata. You left it dangling out there for me. I had to bash it there. So obviously Diggs was the 2nd-round pick. In the 3rd-round pick, the check gets cashed again, coming up all 7s, whatever analogy you want to put. Another OU guy, Neville Gallimore. Again, I don't know. Again, I'm not going to sit here and try to pretend I can break down defensive tackles, but with everything they needed, and this is a very long statement, so take a deep breath, guys, but you got Aldon Smith coming in. Who knows what's going to happen with him? He hadn't played in 5 years. Does he probably make the final, now it's 58-man roster, 59, whatever it is. I wouldn't say he would definitely make it, but they're gambling on him. You got Randy Gregory. Okay, so defensive line was one of the strong points, but it's kind of wavered the last season and a half or so. But typical Cowboys fashion, they've gambled and brought in some questionable folks, though. But adding Gallimore, some folks were saying like right behind the TCU 2nd-rounder, Ross Blacklock. He was Blacklock, Gallimore were 2 of the top defensive line guys in the Big 12. So I think adding Gallimore for him to fall down there, and he gets pressure up the middle. They're saying that he can, and that's where you want your pressure coming, just straight up the gut, and that's what they've needed for a long time. And with Mike Nolan coming in, what does that do for the defensive scheme? They're sticking with the 4-3, but they obviously won't be there all the time. I think Gallimore, again, not to keep, if this is your first podcast listening to, and definitely the first extended amount of time we've talked Cowboys, this is not typical. I do not praise them for the sake of praising them, but I was really happy with that Gallimore pick, Kevin.
Yes, and no, that's not the one they traded for. But, yeah, again, hitting need right there. I think defensive side need, and you have Randy Gregory, but correct me if I'm wrong, he hasn't been reinstated yet.
No,
there's another guy they want. He hasn't been reinstated. I hope he does get reinstated, but that hadn't happened. Has the CBA even actually passed yet? I was looking that up, and I think it passed and then got brought back. Has it actually gone through?
I believe so. Josh, do you have any?
Okay.
Josh, you're the sports editor of us three.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I know it got passed, and then the players wanted to take it back and revote, but I think it's officially passed right now. I don't know what they would. I don't know how they go back, but surely there might be some kind of chance. But yeah.
Okay. That's what I heard. I guess the controversy was the players saw something later after voting, and I was like, well, too bad.
Didn't read it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a 10-year.
Yeah.
How long was the?
Yeah,
it was a long agreement. That was strange to me that it would be that long, especially with the new TV deal coming up in just a couple of years. But I think it was a good pick. Again, fitting need because they don't know what's going to happen on that defensive line, and frankly, the two best positions you can have to stop the pass are defensive line, defensive ends, and cornerbacks. And it's a passing NFL, so that's what you got to deal with,
Y'all touched on it earlier. I think the biggest thing out of that is all these defensive linemen that they've got that you don't know if they're going to be there or not. So you've got to have somebody that you know is going to be there, especially somebody that's talented that you can lock up for. I say lock up, get that rookie contract and be there for a few years right there in the middle. That somebody that you're confident with, somebody that's reliable. I didn't hear much negative coming about Gallimore at all, and lots of people like to nitpick, especially defensive linemen, because they're just so hard to decide how good they are, because they, in general, defensive tackles aren't in on every single play. But he's just a good, solid guy right there in the middle, and another one like the first two, another one that you just can't pass up. That once he's there, you just hope that you don't overthink it and you go ahead and take the guy that's there, as opposed to somebody that you just want to outsmart the room with, saying, oh, we know more about this guy than you do, so we're going to get him. Sometimes the logical choice is the right one to go with.
I think it says a lot about the Tristan Hill draft of last year. I mean, kind of going back about 10 minutes ago, I talked Kevin, they kind of screwed that up. Maybe that's thought it was Marinelli influence there getting Hill. I mean, Tristan Hill was a disaster of a pick. Does he go the Taco Charlton route and just kind of phase out in a couple years? But the name I think you were searching for earlier, Gerald McCoy, another OU guy, he immediately texted Gallimore after the draft pick. I hear Gallimore was really pumped. But you got McCoy, and don't forget Dontari Poe. So I think with what Mike Nolan likes to do, you get a little more beef on that defensive line. They're never unathletic, but I think having Poe, having McCoy, again, they're on the other side. They're not terrible, but they're on the other side of their peak of their career. But mixing Gallimore in there, I think, was a great addition. But you figure Tyrone Crawford's coming off some injuries. He hasn't been as sturdy. He was never a star, but having him in there, and you expect DeMarcus Lawrence to be DeMarcus Lawrence again and rack up double-digit sacks. So I think gradually, again, Gallimore does not make a draft just like Lamb does not make a draft. We'll evaluate it in 2 or 3 years. But it gives you a lot more confidence. I'm a huge defensive line guy. You've got to have that pressure, and it's looking better on that defensive line front.
Absolutely. And I mentioned, it's a passing league, but fact of the matter is football is and always will be, as long as it's tackle football, it will be played in the trenches. You have to have a strong defensive line, a strong offensive line, and those two things are most key to winning football games, have more impact than anything else. But they cost a lot of money because it's a bunch of guys, it's half the team out there on your offense and defensive line. And if you have a strong one, and hopefully this will shore up, make it strong, put a little depth. Even if we get all our guys, we'll have some good depth and rotations. You can keep guys fresh. The Jimmy Johnson school of defense there, keeping guys fresh into the fourth quarter, able to play strong. And that gives you the ability to go for takeaways and go for blitzes from the linebackers, go for play real aggressive in the middle and back of the defense.
Yeah, and I think that's a perfect segue because that was I think I mentioned this before, but with Mike Nolan coming in, their fourth-round pick, Reggie Robinson, along with the retooled look on the defensive line. Reggie Robinson was the fourth-round pick, a cornerback out of Tulsa. Didn't get the highest marks from a skills or just overall intangible. I mean, that's you get in a fourth-round pick, but some scuttlebutt he could be moved to safety. His obvious immediate role that he makes the team would be on special teams. He was already quoted right before we started. I was reading some stuff on him as saying he doesn't care what position he plays. He's a Cleburne kid, probably grew up a huge Cowboys fan, like half of America. It seems like everybody they pick, like Diggs was too. He said, I was just in shock talking to Jerry Jones. But Robinson, he could be you hope that he contributes a lot on special teams and can mix in there and maybe, who knows, be a backup safety. You lost Jeff Heath. You get Clinton Dix in there. Do they move Jordan Lewis to safety? And then Robinson could kind of be one of those swing guys. And Kevin, you've mentioned this already 2 or 3 times. The way the league is, having more fast, physical DBs like Robinson thinks to be. Again, he got a couple interceptions, I think, his last year for Tulsa. So maybe that translates into some kind of ball hawk quality they've really been missing here in the last, umpteen years, it seems like, but at least in the last few.
Yeah, and it gives you depth, and that's something that the Cowboys were missing as well. It gives you depth, gives you some good potential there at the cornerback position, and gives you a little special teams. Hopefully can improve your special teams, and it's just a solid pick. It's a solid pick, I think, for the Cowboys, and again, at one of the biggest needs on the defense and on the team, really. Right there to take another cornerback at that position, and hopefully this will be a good one. A good, not necessarily a project, but he could be very good.
Josh, 30 seconds on Reggie Robinson. Go.
My extensive watching of Tulsa football this year tells me. Now, this is one we were talking about the obvious ones of the last 3 that they just kind of were there, and you had to take them. They were so good. This is where you got to rely on the scouting department, rely on the guys that have looked and seen what they like from them. So one of those, this is one of those I'll have to look back in 2 years and say, oh, did that one make sense? And it's a 4th rounder. So, how can you really tell? But, they needed a quarterback, and like they all said, that gives them depth there. So I don't know if I can really criticize or say how great it is. I would say I like it in general, but let me watch some more Tulsa football and I can tell you exactly what I would think of it more.
Also in the 4th round, this was the trade up, or was Robinson the trade up? They traded up and got one of those 4th round picks.
It was the center.
Okay, so a perfect segue. It's like we've done this before. Tyler Biadasz. I say that right? Biadasz?
Yeah, I'm saying badass. I'm just saying badass.
It looks
Fingers
like that.
Fingers crossed. Knocking on wood.
Perfect symmetry. Center out of Wisconsin. Not to stereotype too much. You get in trouble these days, but Wisconsin offensive lineman that you recently had success with, not only being a Wisconsin traditionally stout lineman producing crop there, but you just had one retire at that same position. So your memory, your football muscle memory will say, okay, I think, but that could get you in trouble too, saying, oh, yes. he's going to be just like Travis Frederick. But does he push Joe Looney? I mean, I don't think you give Biadasz, or Kevin's term for him, badass. You don't say he's going to be the starter day one, but does he get in there and could he be a backup center? I just like that they still address offensive line, and I'm sure there are a lot of parts of Cowboy draft history where you can get guys like this later and still contribute. You're not thinking that they have to be a starter because you're still a little bit better than average on offensive line. Maybe that's a hot take you didn't know I had, but they haven't been as dominant as they have been. Yeah, they've got a lot of weapons to make them look a lot better, but I think you had to at least address something with the line, and losing one of the best centers, if not the best center in franchise history, I think that makes it a reason. I don't know enough to say it's a great pick or not, but that makes sense to why they would at least address that in that mid-round to pick, Kevin.
Absolutely. The center, another huge need. In fact, I would say cornerback and center were the most glaring needs going into the draft. And I'm glad that they addressed that need in the draft, and they traded up to do it because, I mean, the take on this badass here is that he's a solid player. He's a solid player. He's going to give you some depth. Potentially, he's better than that. But they traded up. They made a move for it, a rare move with the Eagles. I actually got it, but we had apparently a compensatory pick in the 5th round too. Traded a 5th rounder this year, a 5th rounder next year, to trade up to get this guy. So the grades from the experts who know more about him than me say it was a good pick and a good move for the Cowboys to make. And I think the need of it has a lot to do with that.
And in the 5th round, again, don't have the full game notes or pronunciation guide, but I'd heard Bradley Ane, or was it Anu, edge rusher out of Utah, 5th round draft pick for the Cowboys. And reading some things on him, he had 13 sacks at Utah last year, 14 tackles for loss. But an NFL guy he studied most is DeMarcus Lawrence, coincidentally. But I read some stuff about him, some bio stuff and some quotes right after the fact. He said he feels his draft stock drops, and that's the reason the Cowboys got him in the 5th, because of his combine 40 time, which is great from the Cowboys' sense, because I think too much is put on those combines anywhere, the aforementioned underwear Olympics. But he said he didn't run the time that he wanted to. He had a pro day in Vegas. He fixed that time. He did better, but they put a lot of stock in that combine 40 time, where he ran a 4.79 at the combine, wasn't able to get the 4.7, 4.8, but he think that's contributed to his drop. Apparently he's like this big risk taker, this big adventurer, big outdoor guy, so he's really a huge personality, but you need kind of wacky guys on that defensive side of the ball. You don't mind a little crazy, not too crazy. You don't mind a little bit of that. That's why you have more reserved offensive linemen. The big eclectic personalities come on that defensive side of the ball.
A little Charles Haley in there, you know.
Yeah, that's the best example in team history.
Or a little John Randall, maybe. Batman.
All right, so that was the 5th round pick. Unless Josh, you had any expertise on Bradley Ane/Anu, however we're going to say.
Well, this guy was like petting sharks.
Yes, that was it. That was, I couldn't come to it. That's why we're such great friends. Yeah, you had the other part of that to me. So now the last draft pick, 7th round, as I get back to the list. Again, we can take this topic however you want to, Kevin, but they got a backup quarterback. Or did they?
What? I think they got the Mike McCarthy project.
Yes.
What it is he likes to develop quarterbacks and stuff like that. And, hey, I think
Ben DiNucci's who we're talking about, quarterback out of James Madison. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I think it's wise every year for a team, 6th or 7th round, unless you got a young guy that you're already developing that you like that's come on strong, go ahead and take it. Because, I mean, wouldn't you want a chance to hit on a Tom Brady or a, Joe Montana or something like that, or a Tony Romo? Wouldn't you want the chance to hit on that every year? And it's a 6th or 7th round in the draft. A bunch of those guys that you may have drafted are going to be undrafted free agents anyway. You can get out there and sign them unless there's something clear and obvious. Since Cowboys didn't have the 6th round pick, 7th round, take a quarterback, take a project, see if you get super lucky. And if nothing else, you got Dak Prescott. If this guy comes in the preseason and lights it up, or God forbid Dak Prescott gets injured and he comes in and pulls a Matt Castle and plays real well, you can trade him for a couple of number 1 picks.
Nick
Bring
Foles.
Dak back.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot here. I didn't think we'd be talking so much about a 7th round pick, but they've got to get a backup quarterback. I'm not saying that DiNucci is the backup quarterback, but what we don't know about Cooper Rush is that we don't know. He hasn't played, right? I mean, he maybe had a snap or two, just taking a knee.
He's done some preseason, and I think his first year, I liked him in the preseason, and he did a few things. And then what was last year, his 2nd year or 3rd year? Since then, he did some cool things in the preseason I liked, and he played some with the first team, and he looked good. And then I think last year he looked just not good at all. He did not develop in any that I've seen.
Yeah, I'm sure Cooper Rush is a swell guy, but if Dak goes down for a few games, like I'm still kind of twitching, Tony Romo seemed to do that a bunch. He wasn't the most sturdy of guys, but his last, I guess, big injury led to the discovery of Dak. But Dak's been sturdy. That's one of his great qualities, in addition to being a leader. And he's brought the lunch pail, but if he misses, I mean, gosh forbid, 3 or 4 games, it seems eventually inevitable. All the greats. I'm not saying he's great, but we don't know.
Not all of them.
Yeah.
Not all of them. But yes.
But it seems inevitable. Yeah, you've got to have somebody. I heard a quote at our taco place today, Josh, through the drive-thru. Josh and I would frequent 3 times a week, but it stuck out to me. Bill Belichick quote. Who was he telling? Jimmy Johnson. It was a podcast. Jimmy Johnson was being interviewed, and he said Bill Belichick told him a few years ago, but it very well could be a Jimmy Johnson quote, that your 2 most important positions on the team, your quarterback and your backup quarterback. It won the Eagles a Super Bowl. This is me now editorializing. It won the Eagles a Super Bowl a couple years ago. So it
won the Patriots a Super Bowl.
Exactly. Yeah. Boom. There you go. You've got to have somebody there, and they have not really addressed that. So who knows? Josh, what do you think? Adding a quarterback in the mix to push Rush, or at least for McCarthy to develop? What do you think here?
They need somebody, because I don't think I'm going on a limb saying if Prescott gets hurt that they're in big trouble with Cooper Rush. Just from the little I've seen, I know he's not there, and I don't think he's going to get there. So getting in there and trying to produce somebody else, I think it's kind of necessary, even getting him in and maybe getting a couple other guys in just to see what they have to at least push Cooper Rush to get a little bit better, because he's, like Kevin was saying, I think he's regressed since the first time we've seen him. And so they definitely got it. They need to address it in some sense, because you wouldn't think Dak would be healthy all year, every year, and you'll need him to at least, hold the line for a little bit so it doesn't get total disaster like whenever Tony Romo's gotten hurt in the past or something like that.
All right, on the free agent side of things, I know this might not be the whole list, so I want to put that blanket statement out there. I broke them down offensively and defensively, and if there's any I missed, please jump in there. And I have a few other personal ties to a couple of these, Kevin. I wanted to surprise y'all with that. But on the offensive side of things, they got a running back, Sewo Ola Louie, 6'3", 230, running back free agent, pass catcher, known as a goal line guy, but he ran for 194 yards in the Cheez-Its Bowl. He's a Houston kid.
Man, I'd run for some Cheez-Its too, buddy.
Yeah. Do you remember I think that's the Cheez-Its Bowl. It was like one of the worst football games of all time.
It was. The Cheez-Its Bowl from 2 years ago, I think, was just fabulous TV. I think it was 7-6, or I don't know. It might not have even been that good. It was terrible, but yeah, I think he was the one.
Yeah, well, so he ran.
Pretty much.
He was the one good thing in that game, I guess. But he was the number 1 ranked athlete in Texas coming out his senior year. He was the state's number 13 prospect in 2016. And obviously Gary Patterson can do a lot with the talent. They had a down year this year. More on a TCU crazy note coming in a little bit. But the Cowboys got another undrafted free agent signed, a running back from TCU, Darius Anderson. He has to pass a physical like all of these guys, but yeah, 2 Horned Frogs running backs, free agents signed. And they got a third running back, Rico Dowdle from South Carolina. So they're really heavy. Maybe it's having the podcast with all you gents that have been more focused on my Cowboys free agent signings. But I don't remember them loading up that heavy at running back. But then I always think it comes back to this. Why can't the Cowboys do that? You hear Denver forever. And who else? Patriots. They always have these running backs. And I'm actually kind of getting heated up about this. Oh, he wasn't drafted, and he ran for 1,200 yards this year, and he just won a Super Bowl. I know it's scheme, but it just frustrates me going back to why they had to pay Zeke that much money. But again, another podcast, another day. But what do both of y'all think about kind of loading up on running backs in the free agent core? I'm sure you knew we'd be talking about this when the podcast started.
You could probably offer more insight, but like I mean, it's just the theory. It's just the theory of running backs. A lot of people think are a dime a dozen, so you get as many as possible and see which one sticks out. Who was the Rams running back that ran all over us a couple of years ago in the playoffs?
Yeah, C.J.
Anderson. 2 years past
C.J. Anderson.
Prime, so
yeah,
that's right. So yeah, that's just a theory. Load up on them and see if one sticks. But which I assume, but maybe Kevin knows more than me.
Well, hey, I mean, you get a Tony Pollard in there, it sort of reinvigorates your faith and finding that, diamond in the rough right there. And, running backs get hit a lot. They get injured. They miss games, having some depth there. And so you want to bring a guy in that can fill a bunch of needs. And they're always good on special teams. They can return kicks.
Exactly.
They can tackle. They're big. It's a good thing. It's a good all-around offensive position to be able to have, and so bring them in, see which ones work out, see which ones don't, and you need practice squad guys too. So go ahead, because if you hit on a big one, then you can trade Zeke. Like you said, there's a big prevailing thought in today's NFL that you should never pay a running back, that you should always be by committee. Should always be a specialized, and that you'll find them and then just scheme differently. It's just tough when you have a Zeke or you have a Saquon Barkley, if you have an all-star running back, but then you look, and you get somebody like Gurley that gets arthritis in the knees at 26 or whatever, and you just paid him a ton of money. What do you do with that guy? It's going to be dead money on the cap if you let him go, and it's not as good as he was.
Yeah, extremely short shelf life. And that's, most people know the stat. Your average NFL career, specifically for running backs, is 3 years tops out, and you got to plan for the future. So maybe out of Olo Nilui, I know I'm butchering that, Anderson and Dowdle, maybe one of them hits and you get some kind of contribution on special teams. But out of all these, we're going to go over here 13, 14 or so quickly. 2, 3. The Cowboys have had great success with undrafted free agents, going back to number 9, who was pretty good at quarterback here, as much as I like to jab them. You go back to their history of Everson Walls, and my gosh, they have done really well in the past. So that's kind of why we're going over these undrafted free agents. They signed 3 free agent wide receivers, one with some East Texas roots, Josh, and from your favorite college. So I guess I'll go in reverse order to kind of gig you first. But wide receiver Kendrick Rogers of Frankston, Texas, just up the road from where we're recording this, but a 6'4" guy, did not do a lot for the Aggies as far as just breakout all SEC type of stuff, but a huge body. He's got some speed. Aaron Parker, a wide receiver out of Rhode Island. And then Stephen Guidry, wide receiver out of Mississippi State. Speed Demon, apparently, was looking at the scouting report on him, one of the top JUCO recruits a few years ago. So, again, like Kevin just said with the running backs, on the wide receiver side of things, it's not as prevalent to get those free agent guys in there, but again, they show up good. You got the expanded practice squad. Maybe one of them does contribute and could be a 4th receiver for you, because I don't think that role is necessarily locked down right now either.
Well, and you also have that's the situation where I think the Raiders mentality actually comes in handy. Super speed. You get some guy in there that's super speed. Maybe he runs 5 routes a game, but once he runs a fly route. He runs straight down the middle of the field, stretches it, and if they follow him, great. Mm-hmm. That's the plan. If they don't, boom. He's got at least 40% chance to catch a touchdown. That's pretty good. Mm-hmm. And some of these guys can always wind up being a stellar kick returner, if not a good receiver. You look at Devin Hester, never made it really as a wide receiver, and although they tried, but boy, one of the greatest return mans in the history of the NFL.
Also on the offensive side, jump in here, Josh, when you have any red-hot opinions about, namely, Texas Tech offensive lineman Terrence Steele. Last 3 seasons, he played right tackle for the Red Raiders. Coaching change mixed in there. So they changed a lot of their style with Matt Wells going out there on the South Plains, but part of a much improved offensive line at Texas Tech. Tight end Sean McKeon from Michigan was signed as a Cowboys free agent. And again, they have all the crazy pronunciations. Tight end Charlie Tamapo from Portland State is out there as well. Josh, any any names jump out at you?
I am a Portland State football aficionado, so expect big things from whoever that guy was you just said. But no, I don't know. Texas Tech's offensive line does seem to be better than when Kingsbury was there getting quarterbacks killed every year, but I wouldn't be able to speak for exactly the individual wise that what they're doing. So it's just my long way of saying that I have nothing to add to that.
Hey, it got Kingsbury a pretty cool pad and an NFL job out in the desert, so that works.
It did. It did.
On the defensive side, Josh, I had to start with this. Ladarius Hamilton, a.k.a. Hambone, a defensive end in North Texas who I saw play 4 times against Rice the last few years. From Corrigan, Camden, the huge metropolis a bit south of us, but I know you're strictly on that Lufkin beat, and you do it so well, but how about a Corrigan, Camden guy on a Cowboys roster, at least for now? Pretty cool, huh?
That's pretty cool for him. He was, like you said, I'm more Lufkin, but he was really good at Corrigan. You know, it's a 3A school, so it's just a matter of that. But he was good at North Texas, too. He was there. I was at the game with you this year. I think Rice actually beat him this year. But
that's right. You were there.
Yeah, I mean, he great player at Corrigan, and, you know, that's another one they're trying to add some depth to. But he was pretty good at North Texas, kind of a local guy. Just let him get in there and see exactly what he can, if he can help him out anyway.
And Kevin, here's the other tie for you, or me to tell you. I actually know his aunt rather well, Hambone, Ladarius Hamilton. At the first nonprofit job I had here when I quit radio and said, I don't want to do that anymore on the radio side. Turned out very, very blessed the way it turned out. Anyway, long scenic way of telling you. I need to get it. I think we're Facebook friends. I need to get a hold of her because she would always, I remember her telling me about him. Oh, Ladarius is going to North Texas. Like, wow, that's good. Like an FBS football offer. So who knows? Maybe he makes it in his Hall of Fame speech. And I just call him Hambone because that's what his aunt always told me.
There you go.
Also on the defensive side of things, they signed a guy named Garrett Marino. Josh, I don't know if you were there for this game or not, but Garrett Marino played his college ball at UAB. Saw him a couple of times, but he was on the Outland watch list. In 2018, he was honorable mention All-Conference USA. He could be 26 by the time the season starts, but he's 25 years old. He signed with Arizona State out of high school. He didn't qualify. Crazy story. Remember researching this for the game. But then when he didn't qualify at Arizona State, he goes to Montana State. He gets injured at Montana State. They got in this kerfluffle about a red shirt at Montana State. This is Garrett Marino, the new defensive end free agent signed with the Cowboys. So they blew up, and he goes, I'm going back to California. He got found by UAB. UAB starting its football program again. And, of course, mutual connections. Everybody knows everybody in the coaching industry and say, hey, restarting football at UAB, why not? Take a flyer on it. And he, was almost literally a man amongst boys. He's in his mid-20s, like a BYU prospect or something. He's in his mid-20s just kicking around Conference USA offensive lineman. He was a surfer growing up. So he's very agile, but he's got that brute force, and he's kind of a nasty guy in a good way. So that'll be a guy, of course, with Hambone too. Maybe his aunt can get his tickets. But Garrett Marino, I was proud I could actually contribute that much substance to the podcast.
Kudos.
I think you contributed more there than like your 6th round, but good job.
When I saw that name, I was like, wait a second.
If you only had stories like that on everybody.
Yeah.
That's the real reason we're doing the podcast today.
Garrett Marino,
I know several people that always say they would have gone pro if not for the weed.
Yeah, I don't know for sure, but I think that was possibly an issue. But hey,
I know a bunch of people like
2020 doesn't matter now, right? Like we were joking about Randy Moss earlier. It doesn't matter now, hence Randy Gregory getting back at things. But anyway,
he beat up his girlfriend in college. Well, that was another thing. Randy Moss didn't just have,
among other things, yeah. I think he had a few things, yeah. Anyway, he's got a great son that's a tight end now. That makes you feel old. But also, running out of time here, but I guess we got all the time we want. But on the defensive free agent sign, Christian Schonefeld, defensive back from Illinois State. Rondell Carter, a defensive end from James Madison. Linebacker out of Utah, Francis Bernard, was signed. And the Football Factory of Kansas, Azur Kamara, an edge rusher for the Jayhawks, and Les Miles. So that rounds out your defensive free agents. But like I said about 10, 15 minutes ago, you hit on a couple of these guys in 1 year. I don't know the NFL average, but you're feeling good, right, Kevin? I mean, that at average about 2, maybe 3 make the roster with the expanded roster, maybe 3. I don't know if I'm anywhere close to that.
Yeah. I like them bringing in a bunch of guys. This is where the scouting team really makes their money. These guys you don't know, and then the draft picks. That's the biggest worry you got. That is paying them in a few years. I think the Cowboys had a good draft, and yeah, I'm excited about it. And as we started the show, I was excited to have some sports, especially some NFL stuff with everybody. Even the optional like training stuff that started. It's all online. It's all virtual. There aren't guys out there throwing footballs.
Guys, went a little overtime, but for our Cowboys and for our great state of Texas, it was a duty well served. Appreciate y'all. I guess we'll talk to at least one or both or none of y'all coming up when we record the full edition with the rest of the guys.
You said duty.
That's where we ended. All right. All right, Josh. All right, Kevin. Y'all behave.
All right. Have a good one.
That's another edition of the Texas Porch, our special Cowboys NFL Draft recap. Please have a great rest of this day or night. God bless. And we'll talk to you later out here on the Texas Porch.
You said duty.
I am a Portland State football aficionado, so